Captain Minho Kim's knuckles turned white as he gripped the command console. The exploration vessel, Daehan, groaned and shook like a wounded beast fighting for its life. Outside the reinforced windows, reality itself seemed to bend and twist, as humanity's most advanced quantum drives pushed against an invisible wall that had kept the galaxy's secrets locked away for millions of years. "Hull integrity holding at 92%, shouted Engineer Tae-hyun over the screaming alarms. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits as the ship's experimental drives channeled enough energy to power a small moon. "But I don't know how much more she can take, Captain." The bridge crew of 20 hung onto their stations as another massive shudder ran through the kilometer-long vessel. 200 souls aboard the Daehan had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return home. They were humanity's best and brightest, handpicked from every nation on Earth, to push beyond the boundaries that had confined their species to one small corner of the galaxy. "Captain, we're getting readings that don't make sense," Chief Navigator Ji-won Park called out, her usually steady voice cracking with disbelief. Her fingers danced across holographic displays showing impossible data streams. "Structures out. They're massive, bigger than anything we've ever recorded. Some of these formations are larger than our entire solar system. The Galactic Council had warned humanity away from this region for decades. They called it the Dead Zone, a place where space itself was broken and dangerous. But humans had always been stubborn about being told where they couldn't go. The quantum drive technology they'd developed was revolutionary, allowing them to fold space in ways that even the most advanced alien civilizations couldn't understand." Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee's station erupted in a cascade of colors and warnings. "Energy signatures are off the charts, sir. I'm reading power sources that make our fusion reactors look like candles. Whatever's beyond this threshold, it's been deliberately hidden from the rest of the galaxy." Captain Kim had served in the Human Defense Fleet for 15 years, fighting pirates and exploring uncharted systems. He'd seen alien megastructures that defied physics and witnessed the birth of stars. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The energy barrier that surrounded the galaxy's edge wasn't natural. It was a wall, built by someone or something with technology beyond imagination. "All hands, brace for breach," Kim announced over the ship's communication system. His voice carried to every deck, from the engine rooms where Yeon-soo and her team nursed the quantum drives to their limits, to the observation lounges, where off-duty crew members watched history unfold through reinforced glass. The Daehan lurched forward as the quantum drives found their rhythm. Space folded around the ship like origami made of starlight. The barrier that had seemed impenetrable began to crack, revealing glimpses of what lay beyond. Ancient energies that had slumbered for eons suddenly awakened, drawn by the ship's exotic. "Matter engines breach in 10 seconds, announced Navigation Officer Seungmin, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. 9, 8, 7. The ship's AI, a sophisticated system named Aria, began speaking in her calm, synthetic voice. "Captain, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies beyond the barrier. Recommend reducing speed to 1/4 impulse upon breakthrough." 4, 3, 2, 1. Breakthrough achieved. The Daehan burst through the energy wall like a bullet through paper. Immediately, the violent shaking stopped. The alarms fell silent. For a moment, the only sound on the bridge was the gentle hum of life support systems and the crew's rapid breathing. As the ship's sensors adjusted to their new environment, the main display screen filled with an image that made seasoned space. Explorers gasped in wonder. Before them stretched not the empty void they'd expected, but a realm that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. Geometric structures the size of planets floated in perfect formation, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with inner light. Massive rings of unknown material spun slowly around cores of pure energy, each one large enough to encompass entire star systems. Rivers of liquid light flowed between floating continents of what looked like living metal, defying every law of physics the crew had learned. "My God," whispered Dr. Sujin Choi, the expedition's xenobiologist, her face pressed against the observation window. "We're not entering dead space. This is someone's domain. Someone built all of this." The ship's long-range scanners painted an even more incredible picture. The structures extended in every direction, as far as their instruments could detect. Some formations were clearly artificial, with perfect geometric precision that spoke of incredible engineering. Others seemed organic, growing and changing like vast spaceborne organisms. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Minji, her voice filled with excitement and fear. "I'm picking up signals, hundreds of them, different frequencies, different patterns. It's like the entire region is alive with communication networks we don't understand." Captain Kim stood slowly, his legs unsteady after the violent passage. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, recording everything, analyzing the impossible data flowing into their systems. They were the first humans to see this hidden realm, the first to witness whatever civilization had created. "These marvels. Set us to silent running," he ordered quietly. "Whatever built this place, we don't want to announce our arrival just yet." The Dayan drifted silently through the alien realm for 3 days, its crew barely sleeping, as they catalogued wonder after wonder. Captain Minho Kim had ordered rotating shifts, but most of the crew found excuses to stay on duty. How could anyone sleep when outside their windows? Impossible structures defied every law of physics they'd ever learned. On the 3rd day, Lieutenant Hyunwoo spotted something different on the long-range scanners. "Captain, there's a structure ahead that's not like the others. It's responding to our presence." The object was a crystalline formation, the size of Earth's moon. But unlike the distant megastructures they'd observed, this one pulsed with energy that seemed almost alive. As the Dayan approached, patterns of light raced across its translucent surface, like neural pathways firing in a vast brain. "It's beautiful," breathed Navigation Officer Jiwon, watching the light show through the observation deck's massive windows, but also terrifying. Something that size shouldn't be able to move the way it's moving. The crystal structure was indeed moving, rotating slowly to present what appeared to be a docking interface. Geometric patterns emerged from its surface, forming a perfect berth for their ship. It was as if the ancient artifact was inviting them inside. "Captain," called out Security Chief Jae-hyun from his station, "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the structure. Whatever this thing is, it's waking up because of us. Kim made the decision that would change everything. Take us in, but keep the engines warm and weapons ready. If this goes wrong, I want us able to run." As the Daehan settled into the crystal dock, the ship's hull rang like a bell. Atmospheric processors detected breathable air flooding the docking chamber. More incredibly, the ship's quantum drives began resonating with the structure's energy field, creating a harmony that every crew member could feel in their bones. "Sir," Engineer Do Yun reported from the engine room, "our drives are syncing with their power systems. It's like our technology is compatible with theirs, but that should be impossible. We developed quantum drives independently." The first team to board the alien structure consisted of Captain Kim, Dr. Sujin Choi, Engineer Do Yun, and Security Chief Jae-hyun. They wore full environmental suits, but the moment they stepped onto the crystal surface, their suit computers detected no hazards. The air was not only breathable, but somehow perfectly suited to human physiology. "This is incredible," Dr. Choi whispered, as they walked through corridors that seemed to grow and reshape themselves around them. The walls were transparent crystal, but not empty. Streams of energy flowed through them like rivers of liquid light, carrying information at speeds that hurt to contemplate. They found the first control console in what appeared to be a central chamber. It was a work of art as much as technology, formed from the same living crystal as the structure itself. When Engineer Do-hyun reached out to touch it, the surface responded instantly, flowing like water to accommodate his hand. "It's impossible," he muttered, as neural interfaces emerged from the console seeking connection with his nervous system. Against all protocol, he allowed the connection. "My neural patterns are syncing with their systems. It's like this technology was waiting. For us, for humans specifically." Back on the Daehan, Communications Officer Minji Han worked frantically with the ship's AI to process the flood of data now pouring through their connection to the alien structure. The information was vast, encoded in ways that should have taken years to decipher, but somehow their computers were translating it effortlessly. "Captain," Minji's voice crackled through the comm system, "you need to see this. The amount of data we're receiving is beyond anything we've ever encountered." It's like having access to the entire history of the galaxy. The story that emerged from the alien databases was staggering. The creators called themselves the Architects, beings who had once been physical like humans, but had evolved beyond the need for bodies millions of years ago. They had transcended into pure energy, pure thought, becoming one with the fundamental forces of the universe. But before their transcendence, they had built something incredible. The Garden, they called it. A vast preserve containing the last survivors of every species that couldn't or wouldn't make the same evolutionary leap they had. Captain Kim stood in the crystal chamber as holographic displays materialized around him, showing the true scope of the Architect's creation. Thousands upon thousands of stasis chambers stretched into the distance, each one containing beings from civilizations that had been lost to time. They preserved them, he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Every species that couldn't make the transition to pure energy, they're all here waiting. Dr. Choi's hands trembled as she accessed the records through her neural link. The information flowed directly into her consciousness, showing her glimpses of cultures and civilizations beyond imagination. Minho, there are over 1,000 different species here. Civilizations we've never heard of, preserved in temporal stasis for eons. Some of the preserved beings looked almost human, bipedal creatures with familiar expressions frozen in their crystal tombs. Others were utterly alien, geometric entities that might have been living mathematics, or flowing creatures that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. And we're the first beings in 1,000,000 years who can actually operate their technology while remaining physical, Dr. Choi continued, her voice filled with wonder and terror. Every other species that found this place either transcended like the Architects or chose preservation. We're something new, something the Architects never expected. Engineer. Do-hyun discovered that he could control the chamber's displays with his thoughts alone. Images flashed around them, showing the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, when the Architects still walked among the stars. They had been the galaxy's gardeners, nurturing younger civilizations and guiding them toward transcendence. But something had gone wrong. The displays showed a great catastrophe, a cosmic event that had forced the Architects to accelerate their plans. They had transcended not by choice, but by necessity, leaving behind their great preserve to wait for someone worthy to inherit their legacy. Captain, Security Chief Jae-hyun said, his voice tight with concern, if we can operate their technology, and we're the first in 1,000,000 years to do so, what does that mean for us? What did the Architects leave this place waiting for? The answer came from the crystal chamber itself, as the Architects' automated systems recognized the humans' unique compatibility with their technology. Deep in the structure's core, ancient programs began to activate, preparing for protocols that hadn't been used since the Architects' transcendence. Something was waking up in the garden, something that had been waiting for humanity's arrival. The Daehan had been exploring the crystal structure for 6 hours when everything changed. Captain Minho Kim was reviewing data in his ready room when the ship's light suddenly dimmed to almost nothing. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the corridors in an eerie red glow, but this wasn't a system failure. Something far more powerful was drawing energy from their ship. On the bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as reality itself began to warp around them. The air shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Consoles flickered and sparked as an overwhelming presence pressed against their minds like a tide of pure thought. Captain to the bridge, Communications Officer Minji Han called out, her voice barely steady. Sir, you need to see this. Something's happening to space itself. Kim rushed to the bridge just as the distortion reached its peak. The view screen showed the crystal structure outside pulsing with blinding light, and then something impossible occurred. Air consciousness materialized in the center of the bridge, not as a physical form, but as a presence so vast and ancient that every human aboard felt like an ant standing before a mountain. The entity didn't have a body in any sense they could understand. Instead, it was a shifting pattern of energy and thought, constantly changing between geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the words bypassed their ears entirely, arriving fully formed in their minds with the weight of cosmic authority. "I am the Warden," it declared, and several crew members gasped as the mental voice resonated through their souls. "Guardian of the Garden, keeper of the Architect's final directive, you humans present an anomaly that requires investigation." Captain Kim felt his knees buckle under the sheer presence of this cosmic being, but he forced himself to stand straight. Every instinct screamed at him to kneel, to worship, to acknowledge his insignificance before this ancient guardian. Instead, he stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "We came here seeking knowledge, not conflict," he said aloud, hoping the entity could understand human speech. "We mean no harm to your garden or the beings preserved within it." The Warden's form shifted, becoming momentarily more solid, more comprehensible. When it spoke again, there was something that might have been curiosity in its mental voice. Knowledge, an interesting concept. All species that have reached this realm face the choice: transcend to pure energy as the architects did, leaving physical existence behind, or accept preservation in temporal stasis until the cosmos grows cold and dies. Around the bridge, the crew exchanged worried glances. This sounded less like an offer and more like an ultimatum. But the Warden wasn't finished. "Yet you operate our technology while remaining corporeal. Your neural patterns synchronize with architect systems in ways that should be impossible for physical beings. This has not occurred in the million years since my creators ascended beyond the material realm." Dr. Sujin Choi stepped forward from her position at the science station. "What makes us different? Why can we interface with your technology when others couldn't?" The Warden's attention turned to her, and she felt the full weight of its ancient intelligence examining her thoughts. "Your species possesses what the architects called creative chaos. Your minds do not follow logical pathways. You solve problems through intuition, emotion, and unpredictable leaps of reasoning. Most species develop linear thinking as they advance. You have retained the spark of true creativity. Without warning, the bridge transformed around them. The familiar metal walls and control panels vanished, replaced by a vast testing chamber that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. The crew found themselves standing on platforms of crystalline light, each facing different challenges that materialized from thin air. "The tests begin now," the Warden announced. "You must prove that humanity deserves to inherit the Architect's legacy rather than join the preserved in eternal slumber." Captain Kim faced a moral dilemma that appeared as a holographic scenario. A dying alien civilization begged for help, but saving them would require sacrificing another species' homeworld. The problem had no logical solution, no clear right answer. Traditional ethics demanded he choose the greater good, but Kim found himself considering a third option that the scenario hadn't presented. Meanwhile, engineer Do Yun confronted a technological puzzle that defied every law of physics he knew. A massive engine design floated before him, missing crucial components that needed to be identified and placed correctly. But the engine's design was based on principles that didn't exist in human science. Instead of trying to understand it logically, he let his intuition guide him, placing components based on how they felt rather than how they should work. The most challenging test fell to Lieutenant Sun Ho Kang at the navigation station. He faced a quantum maze that existed in 11 dimensions. Simultaneously, the path through it shifted constantly, responding to the observer's presence in ways that made traditional navigation impossible. Every logical approach failed, leaving him frustrated and exhausted. "Stop thinking," Dr. Choi called out to him, as she solved her own biological puzzle. "Don't try to map it, feel your way through." Sun Ho closed his eyes and let go of everything he'd learned about navigation and spatial relationships. Instead, he followed something deeper, an instinct that told him which way to turn without explaining why. The maze responded to his intuitive approach, opening pathways that logic had kept sealed. One by one, the crew solved challenges that had apparently stumped the Warden's calculations for millennia. They didn't defeat the tests through superior intelligence or advanced technology. They succeeded because they approached problems in ways that the Warden's logical programming couldn't predict or replicate. Security Chief Jae-hyun Nam faced a combat scenario where victory seemed impossible, but he turned it into a negotiation that satisfied all parties. Communications officer Minji Han encountered a translation puzzle involving a language that changed meaning based on the translator's emotional state, which she solved by embracing the confusion rather than fighting it. As the final test concluded, the infinite chamber faded back into the familiar bridge of the Daehan. The crew stood together, exhausted but victorious, while the warden's presence seemed somehow less overwhelming than before. "You show promise," the ancient guardian finally admitted, and there was something that might have been surprise in its mental voice. "Your species solves problems through methods that defy conventional wisdom. You find solutions where logic sees only impossibility." But the warden's tone grew serious again. "However, promise alone is insufficient. The architect's legacy is vast and dangerous. You must prove that humanity deserves to inherit their technology and the responsibility that comes with it. The true test is yet to come." Around them, the crystal structure began to pulse with new energy, and the crew realized that everything they'd experienced so far had been merely a preliminary examination. The real challenge was about to begin, and the fate of not just humanity, but potentially every species in the garden hung in the balance. Dr. Sujin Choi had been working in the architect's archive chamber for 12 hours straight, her eyes burning, from staring at holographic displays that showed the history of 1,000,000 civilizations. The crystalline walls around her pulsed with data streams, each one containing the complete records of species that had vanished from the galaxy long before humans had even learned to make fire. She was deep in a file about a reptilian race called the Velkani when she stumbled across something that made her blood run cold. Hidden within their extinction records was a communication log that shouldn't have existed. The timestamp showed it was less than 50 years old, but the Velkani had supposedly been extinct for over 1,000 years. Her hands shook as she opened the file. What she found inside made her stomach drop. "Captain Kim to the research bay, Priority 1, she called over the comm system, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, you need to see this immediately, and bring Security Chief Jae-hyun with you." "Captain." Minho Kim arrived within minutes, still wearing his environmental suit from inspecting the ship's quantum drives. The look on Dr. Choi's face told him that whatever she'd discovered was serious. Behind him, Security Chief Jae-hyun Nam entered, with his hand resting on his sidearm, a habit he'd developed whenever the crew faced unknown dangers. "Show me," Kim said simply. Dr. Choi activated the holographic display, and suddenly the chamber filled with intercepted communications between the Galactic Council and automated systems within the garden. The messages were coded, but the architects' translation systems had broken them down into clear, terrifying text. "The Galactic Council knows about this place," she whispered, her face pale as she pointed to message after message spanning centuries. "They've known for hundreds of years. Look at this communication from Council Fleet Command to their Deep Space Reconnaissance Division." The hologram showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with the garden's location clearly marked. Around it, Council ships moved in patrol patterns, ensuring that no other species could accidentally discover what lay beyond the galactic edge. "They've been deliberately keeping other species from developing quantum drive technology," Dr. Choi continued, pulling up another set of files. "Every time a civilization gets close to breakthrough propulsion systems, the Council intervenes. They sabotage research, start wars, even destroy entire planets if necessary." Captain Kim felt sick as he read the reports. The Zephyrian Empire had been on the verge of developing quantum drives when a mysterious plague wiped out their best scientists. The Crystalline Collective had their research stations destroyed by what appeared to be meteor impacts. But the Council's secret files revealed orbital bombardments disguised as natural disasters. "Hey, it's worse than that," Security Chief Jae-hyun said, pulling up tactical displays from his portable scanner. "Look at these fleet positions. Council ships have been secretly delivering failed civilizations to the Warden for preservation. They convinced the Guardian that these species chose stasis over extinction, but it's all lies. The evidence was overwhelming. Species after species had been told they were facing inevitable extinction and offered a choice between transcendence or preservation. When they couldn't transcend like the architects, they were convinced that preservation was their only option. But the truth was far more sinister. Their farming civilizations, Captain Kim said, his jaw clenched in anger. The Council lets species develop to a certain point, then harvest the most promising ones for the garden, while keeping the rest as slaves or subjects. Dr. Choi activated another display showing the Council's long-term plans. They want to be the sole inheritors of architect technology. Once they've preserved or destroyed every other advanced civilization, they plan to claim the garden's secrets for themselves. With architect technology, they could reshape reality itself. Communications Officer Minji Han's voice crackled through the comm system from the bridge. Captain, I'm intercepting massive amounts of encrypted Council communications. They're mobilizing battle fleets across 3 sectors. Sir, I think they know we're here. Kim rushed to the nearest comm panel. How many ships, Minji? At least 200 vessels, sir. Dreadnoughts, carrier groups, and something I've never seen before. The energy signatures are off the charts. They're moving toward the galactic boundary at maximum speed. The terrible truth became clear. The Council had never expected any human vessel to breach the boundary. Humans were supposed to remain primitive and manageable, just advanced enough to be useful, but never capable of threatening the Council's monopoly on ancient technology. They're coming to clean up a loose end, Security Chief Jae-hyun said grimly. Us. Suddenly, the research chamber filled with the Warden's overwhelming presence. The ancient Guardian materialized with an urgency they hadn't sensed before, its form crackling with agitated energy. I have received a priority communication from the Galactic Council, the Warden announced, its mental voice carrying undertones of confusion and growing suspicion. They request immediate preservation of the human species, claiming that your kind has chosen stasis over extinction after failing to achieve transcendence. Is this accurate? Captain Kim stepped forward, his anger giving him courage to face the cosmic entity directly. No, that's a lie. We never made any such choice, and we certainly didn't fail to achieve anything. The Council is trying to manipulate you, just like they've manipulated you for centuries. The Warden's form shifted, becoming more solid and somehow more menacing. Explain this accusation. Dr. Choi activated the holographic displays, showing the Warden its own archived communications with the Council. They've been feeding you lies about every species they've delivered to the garden. None of them chose preservation willingly. They were threatened, deceived, or simply told they had no other options. As the evidence mounted, the Warden's presence began to change. What had seemed like cosmic wisdom now carried the weight of cosmic anger. The ancient Guardian had been betrayed, used as an unwitting tool in the Council's scheme to eliminate competition and monopolize the galaxy's most advanced technology. The Velkhani were told their son was dying, Dr. Choi continued, pulling up file after file. The hegemony was convinced that a galactic plague would wipe them out. The Tree Singers were shown fake astronomical data, proving their homeworld would be destroyed by a black hole. All lies. Communications Officer Minji's voice interrupted again, more urgent this time. Captain, the Council fleets are accelerating. They'll reach the boundary in 6 hours. And sir, I'm detecting weapons charging. These aren't rescue ships. The Warden's anger was now palpable, causing the crystal walls around them to vibrate with barely contained energy. The Council seeks to preserve humanity against your will, while simultaneously bringing weapons to my domain. This suggests they intend to claim the Garden's technology for themselves after eliminating you as witnesses. Captain Kim nodded grimly. They've been planning this for centuries. Use you to eliminate potential rivals, then take everything the architects left behind. With that kind of power, they could control the entire galaxy forever. No, Captain Kim said firmly, meeting the Warden's cosmic gaze without flinching. We choose neither transcendence nor preservation. We choose to fight for the right of every species to make their own decisions about their future. The chamber fell silent, except for the humming of ancient machinery. The Warden's form solidified completely, and for the first time since they'd encountered it, the Guardian looked almost human in its fury. Then we have much to discuss before the Council arrives. The heart of the garden was unlike anything the human crew had ever imagined. Captain Minho Kim stood in a vast chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, its crystalline walls stretching impossibly far in directions that hurt to contemplate. Around him, thousands of stasis pods glowed like stars, each one containing the last remnants of civilizations that had been deceived into eternal sleep. The Warden's massive presence filled the space, its form now crackling with barely contained fury over the Council's centuries of deception. The ancient Guardian had spent eons believing it was preserving species by their own choice, only to discover it had been manipulated into becoming an unwitting executioner of galactic freedom. The Council fleets will arrive in 4 hours, Communications Officer Minji Han reported through the comm system. 200 ships, including some designs I've never seen before. They're not coming to negotiate. Captain Kim stepped forward, his environmental suit's lights casting dancing shadows on the crystal floor. Behind him, his senior staff had gathered for what might be their final stand. Dr. Sujin Choi clutched her datapad, filled with research that could change the galaxy. Engineer Do-hyun Yoon carried tools and components they'd salvaged from Architect Technology. Security Chief Jae-hyun Nam had his weapons ready, though they all knew conventional arms would be useless against the Council's advanced fleet. Warden, Kim said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, I have a proposal. Not transcendence like the architects chose, and not preservation like the Council wants to force on us. Something completely different. The ancient Guardian's attention focused on him with the weight of cosmic intelligence. Speak, human. Your species has already proven capable of unprecedented actions. Kim took a deep breath. We offer symbiosis. Let us become bridges between your realm and the physical universe. We can awaken the preserved civilizations gradually, help them adapt to a galaxy where they're no longer alone. Instead of choosing between energy and matter, we'll create a third path. Dr. Choi stepped forward, her datapad displaying complex neural pattern analyses. Our compatibility with your technology isn't an accident, Warden. It's evolution. Humans developed in isolation without the Council's interference, and our brains adapted to think in ways that complement architect systems. We can facilitate communication between transcended beings like yourself and physical species. The proposal was radical. Instead of the binary choice that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years, humanity offered something the architects had never considered: cooperation between different forms of existence. The Warden was silent for long moments, its form shifting through geometric patterns as it processed possibilities that had never existed in its vast databases. When it finally spoke, there was something almost like wonder in its mental voice. Your proposal lacks precedent. It is chaotic, unpredictable, and defies every logical framework the architects established. The preserved species have been in stasis for millennia. Awakening them could cause psychological trauma, cultural shock, or complete system failure. Captain Kim smiled, the expression hidden behind his helmet's faceplate. That's what makes us human. We don't accept impossible choices. We make new ones. Engineer Do-hyun had spent the last 2 days working with Architect Technology, learning to interface with systems that operated on principles beyond human science. We've already begun awakening 3 species from the outer chambers as a test. The process is working, Warden. They're responding well to gradual reintegration. The first species they'd awakened were the Melodians, beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies that could reshape matter at the molecular level. After centuries of stasis, they'd awakened confused and frightened, but the human crew's patient guidance had helped them understand their situation. The second group were the geometric entities, living mathematical constructs that existed as pure information given physical form. They'd been easier to communicate with once Engineer Do-hyun figured out how to interface with their numerical language through the architect systems. The third species had been the most challenging, the void dancers, creatures of living shadow, who moved through dimensions the way humans moved through rooms. Dr. Choi's biological expertise had been crucial in understanding their unique physiology and helping them adapt to awakening after eons of sleep. Each species we've awakened has unique abilities and knowledge, Dr. Choi reported. The Melodians can heal damaged ecosystems with their songs. The geometric entities can solve computational problems that would take our best AIs centuries to process. The void dancers can travel through space-time in ways that make our quantum drives look primitive. The Warden's attention turned to the awakened beings, who had gathered in a separate chamber to avoid overwhelming the humans with their exotic forms of existence. Through the architect's translation systems, their voices reached the central chamber. "We remember the lies," sang the Melodian representative, its voice creating patterns of light in the air. "The council told us our star was dying, but we can feel that it still burns bright across the void." The geometric entity's response came as a cascade of mathematical equations that somehow conveyed deep anger. "Our calculations show the probability of natural extinction was artificially inflated by 847.3%. We were deceived." The Void Dancer simply whispered from the spaces between dimensions, "We dance again. The long sleep is over." "And the council?" the warden asked, its form becoming more solid and present as it considered humanity's proposal. Lieutenant Hyunwoo Lee had been monitoring the approaching fleets from his station aboard the Daehan. His voice came through the comm system with grim satisfaction. They're about to discover that suppressing 1,000 sleeping civilizations was much easier than stopping them once they're awake and angry. The awakened species weren't just grateful to be free. They were furious at the deception that had cost them centuries of development and growth. More importantly, they possessed technologies and abilities that the Council had never encountered, having been preserved from ancient eras when the galaxy was very different. The Warden's form shifted one final time, becoming somehow more solid, more present in the physical realm. "Very well. Humanity has chosen a path unknown to the architects, and the awakened species support your proposal. I will grant you stewardship of the garden for one cosmic cycle. Prove your worth, bridge builders." The next few hours were chaos as human crew. Members worked alongside awakened aliens to prepare for the Council's arrival. The Daehan's cargo holds filled with architect technology that could free entire civilizations. Representatives from 12 different awakened species volunteered to return with the humans, bringing knowledge and abilities that would revolutionize galactic civilization. When the Council fleets finally arrived at the galactic boundary, they found something they'd never expected: an empty barrier with no trace of the human ship they'd come to destroy. The Daehan had already departed, using Void Dancer dimensional technology to slip away through spaces that normal sensors couldn't detect. Captain Kim stood on his bridge one last time as they approached Council space, looking out at stars that suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. Behind him, alien beings that should have been extinct worked alongside his human crew, planning the liberation of species across the galaxy. "Set course for home," he ordered, his voice carrying new authority earned through impossible choices. "It's time to show the galaxy what happens when humans refuse to accept limitations." The ship turned toward the galactic core, carrying not conquest or destruction, but something far more dangerous to tyrants: hope. In its wake, the garden continued to awaken, and across the galaxy the Council's carefully maintained order began to crumble as species they'd thought safely controlled learned the truth about their imprisonment. The age of the Council was ending, and the age of symbiosis was about to begin. The end.